Smoke is in his Warner Brothers, and I have to convince him to commit to the madness. For almost 50 years, the name Clint Eastwood has been synonymous with toughness, tenacity, and an almost legendary presence in Hollywood. Eastwood has embodied strength and grit throughout his illustrious career as an award-winning filmmaker and in his iconic roles in spaghetti westerns. However, rumors are now circulating about a diagnosis that would endanger not only his health, but also possibly put a sudden and tragic end to his illustrious career. This is not another health issue involving a celebrity. The discussion surrounding Eastwood's condition has made us wonder how much we actually know about the man who puts on a tough front. Whether this is the start of the end for one of the most enduring legends in film history, or if there is more to the story than meets the eye, fans, industry insiders, and medical professionals are all left wondering. We're delving into the disturbing news that has stunned Hollywood and sparked a flurry of rumors in this video. We'll look at how this diagnosis might affect Eastwood's life and legacy, as well as the wider ramifications for elderly celebrities dealing with comparable struggles. So, come along with us as we unravel a tale of ambiguity, resiliency, and a legacy at stake. The part played by Clint Eastwood in the Dollars trilogy as the Nameless Man. On May 31, 1930, Clint Eastwood was born into a working-class family in the center of San Francisco, California, who could not have imagined the remarkable career their son would go on to pursue. During the Great Depression, Eastwood faced adversity at a young age. Due to his father's several professions and frequent moves, Clint was raised with a sense of adaptability and quiet perseverance. Quote, "The stern, no-nonsense attitude he would eventually portray on cinema was largely shaped by these formative years. He didn't become famous right away despite his tall, lanky frame and intense gaze. Eastwood's entry into the entertainment world was actually slow, deliberate, and full of opportunities and rejections that hardly gave a glimpse of the force he would eventually become. As a relatively unknown talent negotiating the ambiguities of Hollywood, Clint Eastwood had formally started his acting career by 1955. His early contributions were small and frequently went unrecognized. However, there was still something appealing about him, even at that time. Kerr had a natural on-screen presence, a brooding intensity, and an impact that required little words. The television western Rawhide, which lasted until 1965 and was one of the most popular series of its day, gave him his big break in 1959. Eastwood portrayed the youthful and impetuous Rowdy Yates, the antithesis of Eric Fleming's more experienced trail boss. Even though Rawhide wasn't praised by critics, it made Eastwood famous and gave him a platform to hone his acting abilities. He laid the groundwork for a career that would soon go beyond the tiny screen by writing, shooting, and frowning his way across dusty landscapes in front of millions of Americans week after week. But what really altered everything was what transpired after Rawhide. Clint Eastwood gambled on Sergio Leone, an unheard-of Italian filmmaker who was putting together a gritty, unorthodox western that would eventually be called A Fistful of Dollars in 1964. It was the first of what would turn out to be the renowned Dollars trilogy. Enter 10. Kofi. A string of movies that made Eastwood a global celebrity. A low-budget film, it was first shown in Europe before coming to the US. A new type of Western hero was presented to audiences with a fistful of cash. 2. The Nameless Man. A gunslinger who lived by his own code and was quiet and ethically dubious. Eastwood has to do more with less in order to fulfill the part. He was a perfect fit. There was less speech, less justification, and fewer conventional heroes. The figure became instantly recognizable due to his piercing eyes, nuanced gestures, and seething fury. Eastwood returned to the role after A Fistful of Dollars' success in 1965's For a Few Dollars More and 1966's The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Both films, which Leone directed, are now regarded as spaghetti western masterpieces. The western archetype, as well as the cinematic vocabulary of action, suspense, and anti-hero storytelling, were redefined by these films, which were groundbreaking for their day. They were initially written down by American studios as foreign oddities, but they soon won over reviewers and viewers, catapulting Eastwood into the world of international renown. He was more than a TV cowboy now. As the personification of a new American masculinity that valued grit, ambiguity, and quiet strength, he had emerged as a movie figure. Eastwood had solidified his position as a worldwide celebrity by 1967. In addition to making him a star, the Dollars trilogy allowed him to direct his own career in the way that he saw fit, something that was never available to many Hollywood stars. His collaboration with Leon was particularly revolutionary. Eastwood learned to speak with his eyes, his body, and his silence while working in the harsh conditions of the Spanish desert with little conversation and dramatic close-ups. He didn't have to exaggerate or justify himself. He commanded attention without asking for it. He just existed on film. He would carry these lessons with him throughout his career, impacting not only his acting but also his potential as a director. The most remarkable aspect of Eastwood's early career is how purposeful and subtly revolutionary it was, even though his celebrity was assured by the end of the 1960s. Instead, he used a combination of perseverance, intuition, and an unwavering sense of who he was, or at least who he was willing to be on screen, to construct his reputation one role at a time. Clint Eastwood had already reshaped what a leading man could be by the time Hollywood realized his true potential. His personalities lacked refinement and perfection. They were real despite being harsh, quiet, and frequently morally nuanced. Additionally, they were a reflection of the evolving American film industry in many respects, a departure from the glitzy, romanticized heroes of the past in favor of something more realistic, flawed, and human. Hollywood's polarizing flicks and Clint Eastwood's contentious conservatism. There was more to Clint Eastwood's journey from television cowboy to global movie star than the roles he played or the stories he picked. It also had to do with the principles he appeared to uphold both on and off screen. Eastwood's character had transcended fiction by the time he had solidified his place in the top tiers of cinema. He was no longer merely a nasty, hairy man without a name. He was Clint Eastwood, a voice, a cultural icon, and ultimately a politician. His final years were characterized by intense ideological conflicts and public controversies, whereas the earlier decades of his career were characterized by artistic development and recognition. And his political connections, personal convictions, and filmmaking decisions started to garner notice for reasons other than their artistic value, such as what they seemed to stand for in the larger American conversation. Additionally, while Eastwood kept on direct, take action, and express his opinions, he began to be seen more and more as a contentious personality in addition to a filmmaker, a man whose views provoked condemnation in some places and appreciation in others. Eastwood's political conservatism is arguably the most talked about and distinctive aspect of his contentious persona. In contrast to many of his Hollywood contemporaries, Eastwood has continuously backed Republican candidates and causes, establishing a distinct and frequently solitary niche in a field that is generally recognized for its liberal inclinations. He has publicly supported politicians like George W. Bush and then Donald Trump, whose choices have generated controversy in the media and among his peers. One of the most recognizable and contentious moments in contemporary political stagecraft is his performance at the 2012 Republican National Convention, where he gave an impromptu and hotly contested speech to an empty chair intended to depict then-President Barack Obama. For others, it was a brave act of free speech. Others found it to be a humiliating and bizarre incident that demonstrated how disconnected Eastwood had gotten from popular culture. Whatever one's point of view, the episode cemented his reputation as one of Hollywood's most vocal politicians and a unique conservative voice in a community that leans liberal. Eastwood's reputation as a divisive figure in the entertainment business was influenced by his own placement as the only conservative voice in a sea of progressive opinions. His refusal to follow Hollywood's ideological norms was respected by some, but his opinions became more and more alienating to others. His professional identity became inextricably linked to his political position, which influenced how the public viewed his work and sparked discussions about the place of politics in art. Perhaps the dual nature of Eastwood's legacy can be explained by this junction of creative effort and personal ideology. He continues to be seen by some as a representation of fundamental American principles, independence, fortitude, and candor. Others see him as a symbol of an antiquated, rigid way of thinking. For those who are unfamiliar with the narrative, these three young Americans were traveling in Europe or Paris, refusing to recognize the shifts in social and political ideologies. His prominence hasn't necessarily been lessened by this schism, but it has made sure that his presence is always questioned and frequently contentious. The constant criticism directed at the thematic content of several of Eastwood's films further muddies his public image. Gentimage. Eastwood has never shied away from telling intricate, ethically dubious tales as a director, many of which deal with conflict, bloodshed, and the idea of justice. Nonetheless, other initiatives have received particular criticism for what some characterize as an unquestioning celebration of conflict. Commercially successful and hailed by some for their realism, movies like American Sniper, 2014, were also criticized for purportedly offering a limited, one-sided view of armed conflict. While Eastwood's direction frequently conveys the ferocity and anguish of battle, critics noted that it occasionally eschews a more thorough examination of the moral, emotional, and geopolitical ramifications of war. They contend that this adds to a simplified narrative that, while acknowledging bravery and sacrifice, fails to adequately address the wider consequences of militarism. For his part, Eastwood has insisted that his movies are meant to elicit thought rather than to impose a certain worldview. However, he still faces criticism that some of his writing tends toward unthinking patriotism, especially from viewers who anticipate more complex analysis of contemporary combat. The language used in several of Eastwood's films has caused indignation and criticism, adding another level to his complex relationship with the audience. Eastwood has a reputation for playing tough, unpolished characters who use honest, frequently contentious language. However, in recent years, language that contains inappropriate terms and racial slurs has come under heavy fire, especially in movies like Gran Torino, 2008. Defenders contend that such language is employed to highlight the flaws in certain characters or to reflect society reality, but critics feel it goes too far, reinforcing stereotypes or tacitly endorsing bad language under the pretense of genuineness. Gunder. Essentially, the argument revolves around impact versus intention. Do these components help normalize terminology that shouldn't be used in contemporary film, or does Eastwood use them to confront audiences and present difficult realities? The acting, directing, and small-town mayorship of Clint Eastwood. Clint Eastwood's journey through American culture hasn't been a straight line, and his career's development only made his public character more multifaceted as he went from being a tough mainstay on TV and spaghetti westerns to a formidable director and civic leader. Following his meteoric rise to prominence with Rawhide and the Dollars trilogy, Eastwood made a pivotal decision in 1971 that signaled the start of an extensive and fruitful directorial career. In contrast to the westerns and war movies that had previously characterized him, he starred in and directed the psychological thriller play Misty for Me that year. In addition to being a box office hit, the movie made a powerful statement that Eastwood was more than just a tough-looking actor. He had a unique perspective as a filmmaker. Eastwood showed a keen sense of tone and tension by picking a narrative about vulnerability and obsession and placing it among the misty coastal cliffs of Northern California. Although it was his first time behind the camera, it would serve as the foundation for his future decades of aspirations as a filmmaker. In the same year, Eastwood also assumed the part that would solidify his place in popular culture. Dirty Harry's Inspector Harry Callahan, the persona, a tough San Francisco police officer with a .44 Magnum and a no-holds-barred mentality, gained enormous popularity but also sparked intense controversy. Some people saw Dirty Harry as a film that embodied frontier justice in an urban context. A man who accomplished what had to be done, despite the bureaucratic red tape. Others saw it as a celebration of violence and an example of totalitarian overreach. The influence of the character was undeniable, regardless of one's position on it. Harry Callahan was more than a character. He became a hot topic in national discussions on morality, law, and order. The movie's popularity led to a number of follow-ups and solidified Eastwood's status as more than just a former Western star. He was now a legitimate movie star and had a big impact on the masculine culture of the 1970s and 1980s in America. However, Eastwood's development as a filmmaker continued after that. After years of performing and gradually developing his directing style, he produced Unforgiven in 1992, which is considered by many to be among the best modern westerns ever produced. In addition to directing the movie, Eastwood played the role of William Money, an elderly criminal who had been called out of retirement for a final assignment. The bleak, gloomy movie Unforgiven challenged the cliches of classic westerns and challenged the myths that Eastwood had contributed to creating in his previous work. It raised difficult issues like justice, morality, and the price of atonement without removing the glitz and glamour of frontier warfare. With 2 Academy Awards, Best Director and Best Picture, and a critical and financial success, the movie restored Eastwood's reputation as a serious director, with the ability to create powerful stories. It wasn't merely a return, it was a redefinition, demonstrating that his career was dynamic and that he was prepared to question the very cliches that had brought him fame. Eastwood also entered a field completely unrelated to the film industry in the early 1990s. Public service. He was mayor of Carmel by the Sea, California, a small, charming coastal town that he had lived in for a long time, from 1993 to 1995. Eastwood's decision to run for government was a reflection of his dissatisfaction with local bureaucracy, specifically a fight over a business permit. Indus permit. Eastwood had always shown a tendency toward independence. After being elected, he worked to expedite the permit process and supported small company owners with his typical pragmatism. Even though he only served 1 term as mayor, it demonstrated his initiative and his ambition to be more than just a well-known figure with strong beliefs. He aspired to be a citizen who had a real impact on his neighborhood. His ingrained convictions of individual accountability, little government intervention, and direct issue solving were also supported by this brief political chapter, values that often reverberate across his film stories. Just over 10 years later, Eastwood enthralled the globe once more. This time with a movie that demonstrated his skill at telling moving stories and his ongoing development as a filmmaker. He directed the subtly tragic drama Million Doll Baby, 2004, which followed a female boxer and her elderly trainer, elderly trainer. The picture explored issues of ambition, loss, dignity, and moral complexity in a way that was unexpected in its grace and terrible honesty. Morgan Freeman and Hilary Swank gave outstanding performances. However, Eastwood's subtle yet effective direction was much praised. He had developed into a highly sensitive director who could convey stories that were both personal and universal. Another high point in Eastwood's incredible career was reached when Million Dollar Baby won several Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director. In addition to demonstrating his storytelling skills, it showed how he had moved from portraying macho people to examining the frailty of human nature, racial stereotypes, political divisiveness, and vigilante justice in his public life and works. For many years, Clint Eastwood's status as one of Hollywood's most recognizable characters has been characterized by both celebration and controversy. Although Eastwood is highly regarded for his talents as an actor, filmmaker, and cultural icon, his public demeanor and body of work have frequently generated heated controversy, especially in relation to the themes and messages in his films and his vocal political opinions. Eastwood's breakthrough performance as Dirty Harry in the 1971 movie and its follow-ups was a major cause of controversy. Although these movies made Eastwood a household name and contributed to the development of the tough, no-nonsense cop stereotype, they also sparked harsh criticism since they were seen as endorsing police violence and vigilante punishment. Harry Callahan is a law enforcement officer who frequently acts beyond the confines of the law, abusing force and breaking the law to achieve his goals. This exaltation of extrajudicial violence resonated dangerously with many people. America was going through a difficult period in the early 1970s. The Dirty Harry films, with their blunt celebration of a hard-edged cop who takes justice into his own hands, were perceived by critics as reinforcing a militarized, aggressive style of policing that glossed over the systemic issues behind crime and social justice during a time when civil rights movements, anti-war protests, and debates over the role of law enforcement in society dominated the national conversation. Disturbance. Despite disagreements, the movies captured the annoyances of a culture in dire need of security and order. They were criticized for encouraging a culture that devalued civil freedoms and due process. Since conversations on police accountability and behavior have dominated public discourse in recent years, this argument has only become more pertinent. Moving forward a few decades, Eastwood's 2008 picture Gran Torino, in which he also directed and starred, brought him under fresh scrutiny. The film centers on a tough Korean War veteran who befriends his Hmong immigrant neighbors in a neighborhood that is transforming in Detroit. Although Gran Torino received plaudits for addressing issues of cultural conflict, racial tension, and personal salvation, movie was not without criticism. The film's depiction of Asian characters and its use of racist epithets were criticized by some viewers and pundits, who said that rather than challenging racial stereotypes, it reinforced them. Many people found the foul language in the dialogue startling, which made them wonder about the movie's purpose. Did Eastwood intentionally use harsh language to portray societal reality, or did it unintentionally perpetuate harmful stereotypes? Some viewed the protagonist's path toward acceptance and transformation as a hopeful one, message about overcoming cultural differences. Others, however, found the film unsettling due to its dependence on stereotypes and its use of racially charged language, which led to discussion on whether it was successful in promoting empathy or merely repeated prejudice in a different way. Eastwood's complicated relationship with race and identity in his writing was highlighted by this dispute, a partnership that frequently elicits praise and condemnation. Eastwood directed the 2014 movie American Sniper, which was the subject of one of the most contentious political issues surrounding him. Chris Kyle, a Navy SEAL sniper with the most confirmed kills in U.S. military history, is the subject of the movie. In addition to being critically and economically successful, American Sniper received a lot of negative reviews and was nominated for multiple Academy Awards. The film's political bias and one-sided depiction of battle, according to critics, exalted militarism without adequately addressing the moral quandaries and human consequences of war. Many believe that the portrayal of characters from the Middle East was too stereotyped and oversimplified, simplifying intricate geopolitical situations to a simple good versus evil dichotomy. Critics viewed the film's patriotic tone as a type of hagiography that failed to consider the wider ramifications of U.S. military action. Supporters, however, commended American Sniper for its powerful human storytelling and for remembering the sacrifices made by service veterans. Wider cultural differences in America about representation, patriotism, and war were reflected in the divisive reactions to the movie. American Sniper became a focal point of continuing discussions concerning the representation of war in popular culture and the obligations of filmmakers when tackling delicate real-life subjects. It strengthened Eastwood's standing as a director who isn't scared to stir up controversy and take on difficult subjects head-on. Eastwood's controversies extend beyond his cinematic output. His public appearances and political remarks have also garnered notice and even harsh criticism. One prominent instance was when Eastwood gave a speech at the 2012 Republican National Convention that went viral right away because of its spontaneous improvised approach. An extended conversation with an empty chair, which represented then-President Barack Obama, was the high point. The unorthodox speech caused division. Some praised Eastwood's direct, spontaneous comments and thought his performance was a daring, comical departure from conventional political addresses. Others thought the behavior was rude and diverted attention away from important political concerns. Eastwood's readiness to voice his conservative opinions in ways that go against Hollywood's largely liberal ethos became typified by the empty chair scene. He is a contentious figure in the entertainment world because of his open support for Republican candidates like Donald Trump and George W. Bush, as well as his criticism of leftist programs. The cultural split surrounding his identity has grown as a result of his political stance, which has made him popular with conservative audiences but alienated some of his contemporaries and followers. One of Eastwood's most iconic uses of his celebrity platform to spread political themes is his 2012 convention speech, which demonstrated how his art and activism intersected in the public eye. Clint Eastwood's struggle with a neurological condition that worsens over time. An iconic figure in Hollywood, Clint Eastwood is known for his toughness, tenacity, and dominating presence on and off screen. However, he just faced a severe personal struggle that might completely upend his illustrious career and public life. Following allegations of a terrible diagnosis that may put an end to his active participation in the entertainment industry, Eastwood's health is now a major concern. The perception of the unstoppable character who has enthralled viewers for more than 60 years has been rocked by this diagnosis, which has caused a stir in Hollywood and among his enormous fan base. Eastwood's reputation for unwavering strength is the foundation of his legacy. A guy whose characters, whether they were the complicated, troubled loners in Unforgiven and Gran Torino or the grim, no-nonsense police inspector Harry Callahan in the Dirty Harry series, seemed to be immune to adversity. His persona created cinematic legends that defined a genre and an era by fusing brutality with a subtle moral sense. But the new information regarding his health highlights a sobering fact. Even great icons like him are susceptible to the weaknesses of aging and disease. Eastwood's physical and mental abilities are in danger due to a medical issue that challenges the very traits that made him a symbol of strength and tenacity. Reliable sources around Eastwood claim that the diagnosis entails a gradual neurological condition that impairs cognitive and physical abilities. This kind of illness, which is frequently linked to degenerative disorders like Parkinson's, can significantly impair a person's capacity to carry out daily duties, not to mention the taxing mental and physical demands of acting and directing. Despite Eastwood's well-known secrecy, insiders disclose that this diagnosis has brought a challenging and uncertain chapter into his life. This news is especially devastating for a man whose career was based on athleticism, keen intuition, and laser-like concentration. Medical professionals point out that these neurological disorders frequently call for extensive care, as well as major lifestyle adjustments. Because these conditions are progressive, their symptoms deteriorate over time, impairing speech, memory, mobility, and judgment. The ramifications are significant for Eastwood, whose career has flourished on his capacity to produce accurate performances and make prompt, decisive directing choices. However, sources suggest that Eastwood is overcoming this obstacle with the tenacity and fortitude that have long characterized him. While acknowledging the challenges the diagnosis presents, friends, family, and coworkers have offered their support, highlighting his courage in facing it. Eastwood's impressive career, which has lasted almost 70 years, is a testament to his talent, as well as his exceptional work ethic and creative vision. He began his acting career in 1955 and first became well known for his role in the 1959-1965 television series Rawhide. Soon after, he landed his breakthrough part in Sergio Leone's Dollars trilogy in the middle of the 1960s, when he gained a global celebrity and helped to define the spaghetti western genre with his famous depiction of the nameless man. Eastwood's ability to blend a stern demeanor with nuanced emotional depth was demonstrated in this trilogy, which catapulted him into international fame. Eastwood's successful parallel career behind the camera began in 1971 when he directed his first film, Play Misty for Me. In Dirty Harry, he played the sharp-edged but profoundly broken Harry Callahan, establishing his reputation as a cultural icon and personifying the paradigm of the strong, morally dubious hero who breaks the law to get justice. Eastwood's direction later won him Academy Awards for Best Picture and Best Director, as well as critical accolades, showcasing his skill at presenting a compelling story that delves into the complexities of violence and redemption. Together with $1 Million Baby, 2004. This movie further solidified Eastwood's standing as a director who can handle stories that are both emotionally and morally complex, winning him more Oscars. In addition to his accomplishments in film, Eastwood also dabbled in public service. Another aspect of Eastwood's complex life was made visible during this time, demonstrating his involvement in politics and the community. Eastwood maintained a busy career even in his latter years, directing and acting in movies that frequently returned to themes of age, introspection, and human struggle. However, Eastwood's future becomes uncertain as a result of this unexpected diagnosis. Even if he has demonstrated exceptional health for his age, the difficulties brought on by a growing neurological condition might make him rethink his methods for working and living in society, According to people close to him, Eastwood is adjusting by concentrating more on tasks that let him use his creative side without requiring as much physical effort. Although his lifelong love of storytelling has not diminished, the extent of his commitment may unavoidably shift.